Welcome to another episode of The Financially Free Investor, where you will learn information and strategies on how to become financially independent by investing in real estate, something that is not taught openly in our society today. Financial freedom matters so you can live a bigger life, retire early, and do what matters most to you. Get ready to hear tried and true methods to becoming financially free with your host, Jordy Clark.
Hey everyone, welcome into another episode of The Financially Free Investor. I've got an awesome interview set up for today. Super excited. So I'll give a little brief introduction and then we'll start talking to my guest, Mr. Mike Burns. Welcome on, Mike.
What's going on, bro? I appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you who don't know Mike, he and I are both here in the Salt Lake area. He's a hard money lender. He flips a ton of homes. He's got rental properties. They've got real estate brokerage. You're just doing a lot of stuff. You're involved in a lot of masterminds, and he's got a really cool work ethic, great mindset, and, just doing big things, being the best version of Mike that he can. I'm excited for this interview for you guys to listen on.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that. It's a nice intro.
Yeah. Hope I covered everything. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, no, dude, we're real estate's kind of our primary business and focus. We've got the mortgage brokerage, and really, your show's financially, about financial independence. So, we've got our main businesses that I'm making money in, whether it's flipping homes or the mortgage brokerage or real estate brokerage or whatever. And ideally taking the active income that we're earning and placing that into investments that are going to provide the long-term wealth and the lifestyle that I want, down the road as well.
Awesome. Well, dude, let's jump in and let's go back in the past, because now we know what you're doing today. When did you get started on your journey to financial freedom?
Cool. So, well, I think the journey of financial freedom kind of starts with a mindset, and that's something you want. And then you got to go through the process of thinking that it can be a reality. So for me, I grew up in a small town in Tehachapi, California. My parents owned a nursery, like a garden center, landscape company. So that's the greatest gift I could have been given and born into. So, growing up in a small town with a small family owned business, just the values that I learned being in that environment, like hard work, and then we're dealing with, a small family owned business. So my dad ran the business. My mom did the books, like just the pressure that you feel from this business all the time. And then we were in the nursery business. So it was like, you're dealing with perishable items. It's very seasonal. The weather comes into play, and then like I remember in the 90s, the economy where we were at in California was real rough. So there's just this constant pressure that the business, put on the family. It was like our family, and my dad probably had like 7 or 8 employees. So just growing up in that environment, I've kind of always had the mind, we were upper middle class. So that's just what I knew, right? Like hard work, business owner. The idea of working for someone wasn't real for me because that's not what my parents did. And then I'm naturally like a type A type of person. So that's the environment that I grew up in. And then I got into sales when I was like 19. I moved to I'll back up. So real estate's what I do. And I think that's, obviously what you do and probably what a lot of the people that listen to you are, real estate's like the vehicle that we look at that's going to get us to financial freedom. So when real estate first came on my mind, my dad sold the business after like 25 years when I was a sophomore in high school. And I watched him take the money from that. And then he partnered with a general contractor that I had known since I was a little kid. So my dad kind of put up the money and he brought the land. And then the contractor built the house, and they had whatever agreement they did. And this was like from 2000, probably like 2004 to 2008. So maybe a 4 to 5 year window. I watched him build a bunch of spec homes and just making a lot of money and did really well with that. So that's when real estate kind of got on my radar. So growing up in this environment where I'm in a family run business and learning the value of a dollar and work ethic, and just, I was really lucky. My parents talked to me about credit and all of that stuff. So just being a product of that environment and then seeing real estate be a thing. But, when you're 16, 17, 18 years old, it doesn't really seem real to me at that time that I could actually do that. So then I ended up getting into sales. When I was like 19, I was doing inside sales. I flourished at that, did really well. And then after a couple of years, I transitioned to being like a 1099 outside sales rep guy. And I was selling trees. So I had Western Canada and British Columbia, or I had British Columbia and Alberta in Western Canada. And then I had like 8 states in the Western United States was my territory. So I started with 0 customer base, and I just went out there and cold called and hustled on thousands of nurseries and built that up. And then I was spending about 6 months out of the year on the road traveling. And one weekend, my brother hit me up and he was like, hey, are you going to be home this weekend? There's a free house flipping workshop. And it was Dean Graziosi was coming to town. You want to go to it? And I said, yeah, man, I'll be in town. Let's go to it. So we went to that house flipping workshop. We paid the $1,500 or whatever for the course. And then it took us a year and 94 offers. And we finally landed our first flip. We made like 24 G's on that deal. And I walked away from the territory I'd spent 4 years building up to about like $500,000 in sales. And I've been all in on real estate ever since that first deal. So that's kind of like where I got a taste of real estate as a kid, and then kind of how that first deal happened and together.
Cool. So a couple of quick questions. I think it's super interesting that you grew up as your parents were self-employed. Did they teach you and show you like any of the books or the back end of the business? Or were you just working there, because I'd assume they probably had you watering plants and taking care of stuff and just kind of helping out as like they were shaping a future entrepreneur, right? But what was that like?
Yeah. And I don't think they were intentional with like, we're shaping future entrepreneurs. I think it was just, we were running the business. It was all hands on deck. So like, I remember being a little kid, like we'd sell cut Christmas trees, So to this day, when I smell like cut Christmas trees, it reminds me of running around, the nursery there. But dude, I was unloading trucks when I was a little, 7, 8, maybe not 7, like 8, 9, 10 years old, unloading trucks or like watering trees. Or my dad would have my brother start on one side of the back fence and me on the other one. And we'd have to pull weeds, till we met each other in the middle. So just helping out, but always like, if I wanted a bike, a new bike, I could have that, but I'd have to work for it. So I really like, more than anything, growing up in that environment, learning a work ethic. Like no one outworks me. It just doesn't, like, work ethics one of my strengths. So that's kind of how all of that went. But as far as like the books and all of that stuff goes, I didn't really see any of like sit down and show me how QuickBooks works or any of that. Yeah. But when you're in that environment and you learn, hard work, but also like value a dollar, right? So like, even to this day, I'm a pretty frugal dude, for where I'm at, and the money I make and what I spend, like I still have that same, value a dollar and be a good steward of money and stuff like that. But I think more than anything, it's just, with our kids, and I don't have kids, but it's not so much as to what we tell them, but it's what we're showing them. And my parents showed me a lot more than they told me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I mean, just to that point, like I believe more is caught than taught. And like, I feel like I had a very similar childhood. My dad was a general contractor, and, I definitely put in hours over the summer and stuff. So I can relate a lot to that. So when you left selling trees to nurseries, you did your first real estate deal. Let's maybe walk through the mindset of leaving a stable job that you built up for 4 years. And I'd assume you're probably making, do you remember how much you were making a year? 50, 60 grand?
Yeah. I mean, so for me, the stable job has never been a program that I've had because I didn't grow up around that. Like, we grew up around the business, and then like I watched my dad like had the nursery, and then he was doing like sales stuff. He was running and operating his nursery in Southern California where I grew up, but he was also a wholesale sales rep selling plants into New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado. So he had a client that he would be a wholesale rep to, like being one of their distributors for all their stuff, not from our nursery, but from a big wholesale nursery in Oregon. And he did real well at that because he could talk to these people because he did exactly what they did. So he understood their pain points and their needs and all the different shit because he's like doing his work. The mindset of leaving like something that's stable. So when I was doing the inside sales thing, I was on like a base. That was probably like the scarier jump. So I was on a base, and there's been a couple times through my life I'll touch on like leaving one level of comfort financially to go to another level that you're stretching towards. So when I was doing the inside sales deal, I was getting paid like $15 an hour or something. And then there was a commission structure too. And I was 19 years old, and I sold like 2.2 million that first year. Just came in and kicked ass, and it was cool. And I made $58,000 that last year. I did a little over 2 million in sales as an inside sales rep guy. But when you're like 19 or 20, and this is back in, 2000, probably 7 or 8, like 60 grand's a lot of money for a 20-year-old kid. So I was able to save a lot of money. Like it was always a game, like to me, like how much can I save from every check? And I stacked like 25 or 30 grand, which was cool. So going from realizing that for me, the mindset piece, like, you have to let go of what you have to get what you want, or you have to leave where you are to go to where you want to be. And there's always going to be like that hallway area of insecurity, and it's new and it's a stretch, right? Because you want something better than what you have. So I was maxed out at this inside sales job. Like I wasn't going to make a whole lot more money. An outside sales territory wasn't going to pop up because guys would basically die in their territory. So a territory had opened up in Washington, and I applied for it. And on paper, I was the candidate. I outsold the other guy applying for it by like double and all this stuff, but the other dude got the territory. So that's when I realized I'm maxed out. There's not more money to be made. Like I'm going to be sitting here inside sales, and I'm very driven, and all of the like growth is a big deal to me. So I started looking at other opportunities, and that's where I ended up moving to Utah, and I had that huge territory that I told you about. So I went from having, a solid base plus like, consistent customers. I was just servicing existing accounts and shit like that. So 60 grand a year. And then now I'm going to this huge opportunity, but it was commission only. I was 1099. I got 10% commission, and I had to pay my own way for everything, but I was able to negotiate like a $3,000 a month draw. So I would draw down 3 grand a month against future commissions. But again, I started with 0 customers, like none. And that was also in 2008, 2009, right when everything tanked. And the nursery business is very relationship driven. So like people's client, like your suppliers, you've been working with them 10, 15, 20 years. So I went in kind of being cocky and thinking I'm going to go, like I was looking at the company I was at, and they were doing like 8 million a year in sales volume, and what this new territory of mine was going to be. So I thought I was going to come in and just crush it, dude, do 2, 3, 4 million my first couple of years. That'd be $200,000-$400,000 a year. So there was a big dream and idea, but then the reality of it is totally different. So then you're out there cold calling, and I have 3 grand a month for all of my travel expenses, printing, all the catalogs, flights, hotels. So I would drive and sleep in my car and all that stuff. And I was just too dumb and young at the time to really comprehend like what a risk that was, or what a difference in lifestyle was going to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think I guess what I'm getting at is my drive and my motivation to want to do more and make more, and being focused on like what the upside potential was stronger than the fear of like, I don't want to leave 60 grand a year, because I knew I was maxed out there. So It's like, okay, I can stay maxed out and safe, and I can be a little like this sign says right now, or I can go continue to grow and pursue what I want to do. And I've gone through that process multiple times. So I did that when I was going to sell the trees. And then, I built it up to like $500,000 a year in sales. So I'm making 50 grand, which wasn't that much money, especially thinking about it now. Like I wouldn't have done that for $1 million a year salary today. But then, so, I got 50 grand a year now, and I've got my clients and everything's going and it's consistent and stable. Well, now this real estate thing happens, and like we go do our first flip, and we make 24 grand on that deal. So again, I see potential, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm traveling all the time. Like, who knows how much I'm going to get my sales to. I have big overhead and all this stuff. I just made $24,000 on one real estate deal, even though it took us a year to get it. So then I made that transition again. I like walked away from that whole like territory and thing that I had, and I jumped straight into real estate and started doing that. And then fast forward to 2015, I started getting into mortgages. And I'm making $200,000 a year doing mortgages, but like I'm licensed in 40 states. The owner of the company has leads coming in all the time. He's spending $500,000 a month in marketing. So like now, again, I'm comfortable. I'm making 200 grand a year. I'm a President's Club guy. I'm like number 6 in the whole company doing mortgages, and I still have my flips and other shit going on. But I have this comfortable $200,000 a year. But again, I was maxed out. Like I couldn't do more than 20 loans a month. There wasn't more hours of work. I was already doing 150 phone calls a day. Like, so I'm maxed out. So then I'm realizing like, okay, there's nowhere else for me to go here. Do I want to stay comfortable with 200 G's a year plus like my side real estate stuff I'm doing? Or do I want to go out and expand and do that again? So then I made that move again and walked away from that kind of money, going to, commission only, no leads, no anything, got to go eat what you kill. So I've done this process like 4 times over in my life, and it's just part of the deal. Like if you have to leave where you are to get where you want to be.
Yeah. And that's interesting you say that, because there's definitely, levels, and you definitely step up and have to step into maybe a higher version of yourself, right? As you go from, a lot of people use flipping, is my opinion. Like, they'll leave their job and start flipping houses because they see that the ceiling's bigger, right? And then I don't know what you think about this, but I also think people flip houses for 4, 5, 6, 10 years, whatever, and then realize, holy cow, I own my own job and I can't walk away from it, because you got to babysit everyone that goes into flipping houses. And then they kind of level into the next version of whatever they're trying to create. From 2009 to 2015, were you flipping houses and originating mortgages?
Okay. So my brother and I did our first flip in 2012.
Okay.
So we did that first deal in 2012. And as we were going through the rehab process, I remember over Christmas and New Year's Eve, I signed up and got my real estate license. So it's 120 hours in Utah. So I banged that out in like 10 days, because they only let you do 8 hours a day, but the clock resets at midnight. So I'd start at like 4 or 5 in the afternoon and I'd go to like 3 in the morning. So I did all 120 hours in like 10 days, and I went down, took the test, got my real estate license so we could list that first flip and save the money on the commissions.
Yeah.
Then also, like, you have access, you can start pulling your own comps. And back then you could buy shit off the MLS. So I had access to the super box, and just, if we bought a deal off the MLS, I'd make a commission. So I got my real estate license just because it made sense as an investor. And then I remember one day I was driving down 2700 South on a Saturday, and there was this for sale by owner doing an open house. So I like pulled over, and a lot of this is what we're going to talk about, is just taking initiative and doing it instead of thinking about it all the time. So drive down, I see this guy's for sale by owner doing an open house. So I pull over, and I'm trying to buy the house, like, and the price wasn't going to work. And I'm like, well, hey, I'm a real estate agent, man. I could help you list it if you want. And I told him I'd do it for like 1%. I think I listed it for 280 grand. So I made $2,800. But I remember when I did that deal, in the meantime, I've always been doing flips. So we started with flips. So flips and wholesales is always going on as I'm talking about this other stuff. But I listed this dude's house and I sold it, and I got a check. It was $2,800. It wasn't much, but I was like, damn, like I had nothing at risk. It didn't take 4 months, 6 months, and it was just quick, easy money. So then I was like, retail real estate is something I should be doing too. So then I left equity real estate, which is like a discount brokerage here in Utah, and I joined Century 21, and I joined Chris Martindale's team as a buyer's agent.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So Chris was, I don't know, probably 4 years ahead of me in real estate, and I think he was selling about 50 homes a year at that time. So I went and joined Century 21 Everest. And this is a big thing that the listeners, I want you to pay attention to what I'm saying, is like, I'm plugging into an environment where what I want to do is happening, and being around someone who's doing what I want to do. And the same thing with Slaria, the real estate investor groups. Like, I started going to Slaria all the time because that's where real estate investing was happening. It's what I wanted to do. So I plugged myself into that environment. And just a side note, because that's super important. It's like a major reason why I am where I am. So I joined Chris's team, and I started doing the retail real estate stuff. And then I was still flipping houses. I'd have a deal, maybe 2 flips at a time going, and then started doing retail real estate. And that was probably 2013 to 15. And then in 2015, I had a buddy. Do you know Jed Hardman?
No.
So Jed came to me, and he was doing VA streamline refinances nationwide, and basically had an opportunity. Said they had more business they could handle, and like it'd be a good opportunity for me to make some money. So in 2015, I got my mortgage license, and I started working in an office and doing mortgages all day during the day. But then I had a loan officer that me and him were splitting the cost of leads. So anytime he would get a pre-approved buyer, then I would do the real estate agent thing. So I had the mortgages going on, just originating loans. I was doing the real estate agent stuff. And then I would always have like 1 or 2 flips going at a time. So from 2015 to 2017, I was doing the mortgages pretty much all day, the refinances. That's where I was making a couple $100,000 a year, and just, it was busy. So I always had the other shit going on too. And then fast forward to today, that's kind of how everything's progressed. So now we flip about 40 homes a year. Me and my brother own a mortgage company together. And then I got the real estate brokerage as well. We've got about 58 units, rental portfolio, lending hard money. So that's kind of the evolution of everything.
Cool. So when you were, doing the real estate agent thing as a retail guy, and then also doing mortgages. My assumption is you were living off of, say, half of that income you were bringing in, and then all of your flips, were you taking that cash and buying rentals? Were you like, what were you doing? Were you borrowing hard money?
Rolling it to the next deal. So the way that I've always funded my deals, and it's still the way, if I borrow money, so if I'm not funding it on my own, the way that I did my deals then, because hard money guys, especially when you're newer, they want to see you have skin in the game. So I would borrow hard money for the purchase price of the property. And then I would use my money, whether it was cash or credit, to pay for the rehabs. So all the money I was taking, it was just always rolling into the next deal. But a part that I left out is we lost 50 grand on our second deal. We lost $12,000 on our third deal. We broke even on our fourth deal, and we made like 10 grand on our fifth deal. So I took some major setbacks there. And on that first flip, I had like money, and I had like 25, 30 grand saved up between stocks and just savings. So I sold everything, and I had 30 G's to work with to get that first flip done. And then me and my brother both went and took out Home Depot cards and maxed those things out. And that's how we paid for the first rehab. So then we got the money back, rolled that into the next deal, plus like the 24 grand we made in profit because he had a job and was working, and I still had a job and was working. So I've just for 10 years now, I've taken the money and I just roll it and roll it and roll it and roll it. And now, I'm lending hard money. I buy stuff, some homes like we'll buy on our own money, but I'm still to this day floating all the rehab on my own cash and credit.
Yeah. So at what point did you decide, hey, I'm not going to roll this X amount of dollars into the next flip, and instead I'm going to go buy a rental property, right? Buy some passive income. When did that kind of click?
Our first rental was in late 2013, early 2014. And I wasn't bankable at that time either at all. So like I wasn't even bankable probably till like 2016. So
meaning bankable, just so no one gets left behind, meaning they wouldn't lend you money based on your tax.
I wouldn't qualify for a traditional mortgage. I've always had really good credit, but I didn't have any taxable income. And at that time, like non-QM mortgages, DSCR loans, stated income, bank statement loans, all that shit was still dead in the water coming out of 2008. So our first rental property was a seller financed twin home in West Jordan. So it came from a wholesaler, and dude, we put like wholesale fee at like all in closing costs and everything. I think we put down like 7 grand.
How much did you pay for it?
We took it over. So we took it subject to, we put down 7 grand, and that covered the wholesale fee, closing costs, and like a few $1,000s for the lady to move to Montana. We took it subject to on like I think it was an FHA loan. The rate was like 4.75%, and she had paid it down like 4 years already. So
that just means you took over the mortgage, started making her payments. So she could
loan. Yep. Yeah, I for the loan, no balloon payment or anything. So that was the first rental. And then we probably put like 5 or 6 grand into it, painting it, cleaning it up. So let's just say our mortgage payment on that was $850 a month. We had it rented for, I think we first rented it for $1,200, and then towards the end there it was rented for like $1,550 a month.
Yeah.
So we're cash flowing, I don't know, $700 or $800, which is cool, awesome, whatever. But fast forward, we exited that property last year and we made $300,000 on it between the cash flow that we had made and the upside appreciation and all that stuff. So then you take that and roll it. So I bought that was our first. So my first like 4 rentals were all seller finance, and they were all deals like that. Came from wholesalers. One was off the MLS, but it was minimal money down. And I wasn't really so much focused on the cash flow. And to this day, I don't really focus on the cash flow. I'm more concerned in controlling assets with as little money as I can, because I make plenty of money flipping homes with the mortgages, hard money, different stuff. So I have money coming in. So for me, like it's more midterm and long term. I want to build equity and control as many assets as I can while keeping as much cash on hand as I can as well. That's you love the Burr method. Like I'm all about that too. But that's when I bought the first rental. So, but the first 4 or 5 were all on seller finance, just being creative, making it work, taking the money we're making on flips or mortgage commissions and just doing that. And then finally started paying taxes and like getting a little more, like I need to be bankable. And it's just kind of slowly developed to where it is now.
Well, and so I think this is super important because a lot of people like doing their first deal, buying a rental, whatever, we all have these self-limiting beliefs that, I I can't do that. I can't get a loan. And so people just don't, right? But you got creative. You figured out a way. Sure, it wasn't the first house you saw that you bought on seller financing, but when a wholesaler sent it to you, I'm sure you were like, hey, like, let's go, $7,000 down plus some rehab. And if you're anything like me at the time, you were like, hey, this is a lot of money to leave in a deal for a while. But then I think there's also the mentality, and this is where I want you to kind of touch on for a minute, that like, if you buy a property, like some people are like, I'm going to get it paid off and I'm never going to sell it. But you guys sold that, 7-8 years later. And we actually talked about this property because I bought one at auction right before COVID hit. It was a very similar deal to that house. And I remember selling it, and like I fire sold it to just get liquid because I thought right after COVID, it was going to be like 2008 all over again, which, I mean, we could be heading into that again, who knows? But why'd you guys decide to sell it? Because I think that's another thing that people are like, they don't reanalyze their portfolio is what I'm getting to.
Yeah. Before I answer that, there's something that you talked about that I want to touch on because I think it's important, and that's the mindset and the limiting belief around money. So when I first started coming around to Slaria and different stuff, like, and if you're a newer investor, even today, like with me looking at larger deals, money is always a thing. Like, where am I going to get the money to do this deal? And people then would tell me, and this is what I say now, like, if you have a good deal, there's always an abundance of money for a good deal. Like money, there's money wants to be part of good deals. So if you have a good deal, like, the financing's not a problem. And if you're putting yourself in the environment, like going to the RIAs and the networking and doing the different stuff, and you're building those relationships, like, that's not going to be an issue. But the other piece of that too is you don't have to have 20% down to buy a rental property, or you don't have to do the house hacking thing either. Like, so you learn more tools, right? So the mindset and like doing the self-development and educating yourself and learning about creative finance, and having just more tools in your belt to be able to acknowledge maybe this isn't a flip, but it could also be a rental. Like, so the more tools that you have and the more you expand your mindset and your knowledge, the more, like, you're not going to look at a deal as just like, this is the only way you can do it. Like, you're going to have more options on it. So being creative and scrappy is like, that's how you're going to, like, you bootstrapped your business too. You know what I mean? Like, so the limiting belief that you have to have this big bankroll or these big investors or all this money is just simply not true at all. You just have to have grind, grit, and hustle, and go build some relationships, and you can do deals. But why we sold this particular property, it was on seller finance. So when you have an underlying mortgage like seller finance, it's really hard to do a HELOC or anything like that behind it because the banks don't love that. And a lot of underwriters just don't understand it when they look at it. So we were cash flowing, like, say, call it $700 a month, which is awesome. That's great cash flow for a property. But when you have $250,000 to $300,000 in equity sitting there too, it was a no-brainer to pull the equity out. And, the market's shifting, and, it's been real frothy the last couple of years. So it just, looking at it, I'd rather have that money in hand for other opportunities, or to lend out, or to do whatever, instead of making $700 a month. So we sold 2 of our properties last year, netted $500,000 between the 2 of them. And now I'm lending that out hard money, 4 points, 5 points, 12%, 15%, or, looking at rolling it into commercial buildings or whatever it is. So it's just the idea of rolling it up. And again, cash flow doesn't, like, $700 a month doesn't change it doesn't change my life, but having 3, 4, 500,000 of capital makes a big change in my life and what I'm able to do with it. So it just made more sense to do that. So I'm not really interested in paying properties down when I'm 35 years old. I don't care about paying properties down and having big cash flow right now today, because I'm confident in my ability to make everyday ordinary income. So I just want to keep stacking it into assets. So in 20 years, it's going to matter. It's going to be tens of millions, not just single digit millions.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that's important. I think, I don't know if it was Clay, someone at RIA said once, they were like, Utah is no longer like a cash flow state. We're an appreciation state, right? And if you think about it, we've got these large geographic borders that just prohibit building for miles and miles and miles. But I mean, the cash flow, like, you don't want to buy something that's cash flow negative, or, maybe a few bucks negative, but not like losing $1,000 a month kind of a thing, because you want it to cover itself. But in the long term, like, that's what makes you wealthy, is the appreciation, and like putting down $15,000 and turning it into $300,000 in 7 or 8 years with little time invested out of your day, right? Like, once you bought the deal, it was kind of autopilot. And that, I think that's what most people miss, is most people don't see the 10-year vision, and they just want the right now money because they don't like their job, or, they need 30 grand to pay taxes, or, whatever. But they forget about playing the long game while they're playing, the short game for today's income.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the, the short-term gratification is, delayed gratification is a big part of that as well.
Yeah.
That outlook and that mindset. And a lot of it's perspective too, and it's, I think as an investor, you need to kind of be clear on what's your box, like what is it you're trying to accomplish. So then you can actually identify, number one, you have your strategy, but then like when a deal comes to you, like, if it fits your box or not, and you can execute on it. Otherwise, someone else is going to grab it. But, if you're reading books and you're only in your, because there's a lot of real estate books and there's a 1% rule, right? So for rental properties, anyone that's read stuff, like everyone talks about the 1% rule, you should have cash flow of 1% of the value of the home. Like that's not happening at all in Utah. It's just not going to happen. So then, you got to look at that and decide, maybe the Midwest or somewhere else where it's a cash flow market and you buy a duplex for 120 grand and you make $800 a month, but it's not here. So I think really being clear on what type of investor are you? And then another part of what type of investor are you that you really need to be clear on as well is like, are you an operator or are you a passive investor? Because that's two totally different things. And you need to be clear on that too. Like, because if you're operating, like that's work, that's in the trenches, that's, responsibilities on you versus passive, whether it's like me lending hard money or you just, you realize you're going to put property management in place or whatever. But I think it's really important that you're clear on what type of investor am I.
Yeah, that's really good. So talk to me about your mindset as you've gone through these levels of real estate investing, right? Even just like personal growth. Talk to me about who you have to get around and why that matters.
Your mindset and your environment are going to make or break you, period. Like this is a fast paced moving, like high risk, there's a lot of money involved, stress involved, like there's a lot of moving pieces, especially if you're doing rehabs and stuff like that too. So like your mindset, things in real estate aren't going to go well. Like when things go smooth and as planned, it's like a surprise. So your mindset, and it doesn't matter if you're even if you're not doing investing, but like your mindset is going to be like the reality that you experience is going to be in direct proportion to your mindset. And as you level up and you make more money or you have more investments or you're growing or you're doing more, you're going to have bigger problems that are more stressful, and so you have to grow your capacity and your ability to handle stress and adversity and issues. So if you're not growing your mindset, you're simply not going to be able to function and even show up the way that you need to even have a shot at growing a portfolio or building a business or whatever it is. So like your mindset, no matter where you go, you bring you and not only your mindset but also your attitude with you. So your attitude, your mindset, and your energy are all kind of the same in my mind, your perspective. So like Henry Ford said, whether you believe you can think you can or you think you can't, you're right either way. So your mindset's the foundation of everything, and you're never going to outgrow your mindset ever. Like you're not going to outgrow your mindset. So as you want to grow more, that's going to require you to think bigger, to have a stronger belief in yourself, to have more self-confidence, to learn more skills. And as you do that, your mindset grows. And as your mindset grows, your confidence is going to grow. And then as your confidence, your mindset grow together, then you're going to believe that you can actually do whatever it is you're looking to do. So I think mindset's the foundation of everything. And then the environment that you're in that you need to be around. So like I wanted to get into real estate investing. So I went and joined SORIA, Salt Lake Real Estate Investor Association, because that's where people are doing real estate investing. So whatever I want to do, I want to go put myself in the environment where that's happening. And then take it a step further, you go put yourself in that environment. So now you see that it's real and people are doing it. So it's like, well, if these are people who are doing it, then I can do it too. Now I have the confidence of seeing it firsthand. It's like, kind of like I said earlier, it's not what you tell them, it's what you show them about the kids, right? Like if you put yourself in an environment where you want to do is happening, well, now you're seeing that it's real and other people are doing it, so you can too. And then find yourself a mentor or a friend that's doing what you want to do and just show up and provide value, show interest. Hey, I'm new, I'm learning. I did this with Luke Watkins, Luke? Yeah. Luke was like a year down the road from me. Matt Atkinson introduced me to him, but I was like, hey bro, dude, I'm new. I haven't flipped any homes. This is what I want to do. Like, looks like you're doing some deals. Like, could I come check out one of your properties sometime? And he was like, hell yeah. I'd love to, man. I'll be there tomorrow or whenever it was. And I went over there and I met him at his flip that he had going on. So went and walked the deal, and he told me where he got the deal. He told me how he, financed the deal, what he's doing to the rehab and why, roughly how much stuff's costing, how he analyzed it, all the stuff. So now not only is like flipping houses real, but now I'm actually like on site at a flip, and this dude's teaching me all this stuff and I'm learning. And like you just keep doing that, and as you level up, you just keep doing that same idea, and it's just it's an ongoing thing. Kind of like you and I pay a lot of money to be in masterminds. We were talking before we started recording today. I spend about $125,000 a year on self-development, masterminds, and putting myself in the environment where like what I want to do is happening.
Yeah. So dude, let's talk about that, because I am interested to hear what masterminds you're a part of, why you're a part of them, and the relationships you've formed, because I think that's probably the most important thing. Just like you were saying earlier, when you start getting around people who are doing cool things, like you start to have this self-belief, like, well, man, like I know them, they're, a good guy, good gal, whatever. They're doing it. If they can do it, I can do it. Right. And who you surround yourself with, in my opinion, is who you become. So tell me a little bit about the higher level stuff you're doing and what you've seen because of that.
Yeah. So I've always, back from when I was doing that inside sales job, a guy gave me success through Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude. That was my first self-development book that I ever read. And this was during that time where I was having a really big sales year. And then the guy who gave me that book, one day I came into, this is going to be a long answer, I'll tie it together, but I came into my cubicle, came into work one morning, and on the outside of my cubicle was like a computer paper printed, and it had 2 million, the number 2 million on it. And I came in, I'm like, what is this? And he's like, you're going to hit 2 million in sales. You're going to do it this year. Like, I believe in you. And this dude believed in me more than I believed in me. But he wrote that 2 million on there, and that would have been a company sales record for sales. And like, it was my first full year doing it. So I have this $2 million thing that I see every day when I come into work. And now I'm reading this book, whatever it was, Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude. So at that point in time, when I was 19 years old, I'm reading, and I ended up doing 2.2 million in sales that year. So I'm reading this book, Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude. And then I'm literally having like essentially a vision board right there. And that happened. So that was like extremely eye-opening for me at a young age, 19 years old. So that's when I first read my first self-development book. So I was always reading and stuff. And then I started going to Sloria and doing the in-person stuff, not where you're listening to an Audible. And before that, when I was traveling all the time, doing sales in the car, I bought Brian Tracy. I don't know if you know him, old school sales guy. I bought his sales program. It was like 12 or 18 CDs. And I'd be listening to that while I'm driving all the time and doing the whole University on Wheels. So it's all like the same that these guys have been talking about for 100 years. There's no new ideas or concepts. So I was always doing that just on my own. But, when it's just you on your own, like you're your own cheerleader, like you just kind of feel like you're in no man's land. You're on an island by yourself, when you're just doing it by yourself. So then I show up to Sloria, and, you start networking, and people are like encouraging each other, and you're learning from others, and you're seeing other people do deals. And then I get a mentor named Luke there, and I meet Matt Atkinson there, and Josh Christensen and Randall Wall, and all these guys that I look up to and have great relationships with now. But you're in that room. And then, the first probably 5 or 6 real estate deals I did, everything came from being in that room of Sloria. The deal came from there. The money came from there. The title, like Christina, who's done all my title work from day one, I met there. The contractor came from there. The wholesalers came from there. So that was adding on to this. Okay, I'm doing self-development and I'm seeing results there, but now I'm going and plugging into a group of people and networking, and I'm seeing results there too. So then, the first mastermind I joined was Arete Syndicate, and it was a big price tag, dude. It was 65 grand for the year, or $6,000 a month. And that was Andy Frisella and Ed Milet. And I got introduced to those guys, or they came on my radar listening to podcasts. So then actually I'll back up. Before then I'd start going to like 10X Growth Conference, like Grant Cardone. Most people know Grant Cardone. So I go to the 10X Growth Conference, and it's a 3-day thing. But again, you're in this environment, speakers are coming in, people are paying up to 20 grand for a ticket to be there. You're networking, and you start like I started identifying when I put myself in these rooms, like I'm meeting different caliber of people, and they're serious like I am about being successful in life and business and real estate. And then I started, instead of getting the seat in the back of the room, I started investing in getting like the executive ticket. And then I started realizing as I go to these conferences, when I buy a different ticket that costs more money, well, the people sitting in that area that I'm meeting and networking, they're different. They're on another level. So then I started buying the VIP ticket when I go to these events, and I start realizing I'm seeing guys wearing Rolexes, and I'm seeing symbols of success and like nicer suits and a different mindset. And these guys are making more money. And then now anytime I go to a conference, I buy the best ticket, I sit in the front. It's just what I do, period. It's a rule. And same thing, the people who are willing to invest in themselves, like buying a front row ticket and traveling to go to a conference, they're real serious about self-development and business and money and all this stuff. So as I continued doing that, that was cool. But then I joined, so Arate Syndicate came up, and it was 65 grand for the year or $6,000 a month, 72,000 for the year.
I'm going to stop you for 1 second because I just want to point out that Mike is giving everyone listening a roadmap.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Well, with the roadmap, but one thing I want to talk about, because now we're talking about spending bigger money. I guess big is relative, right? But now we're talking about, so if you're sitting there and you're listening, you're like, oh, well, I can't spend that kind of money. It started with a $10 book. And then it started with listening to CDs in the car. And then it started with spending $100 to join Solaria for the entire year, which is $8 a month.
Yep.
And then it started with buying $1,000 ticket to go to a growth con, and then a $5,000 VIP ticket, and then a $10,000 diamond ticket. So don't get, again, like people use money as an excuse, whether it's like, I can't get in that room, or I don't have money for a deal, or whatever it is. Like that's nothing more than a bullshit story you're telling yourself because you're copying out on yourself. So don't.
Well, and it's a decision that you're making, right? If you choose to say no, we'll say like, if you choose to say no to a $10,000 ticket, you're also saying no to your future self that can grow, that you can grow into, right? So it's not an expense. All of this self-development and masterminds, this is not just like, hey, let's just go blow 10 grand to blow 10 grand. That's an investment in yourself and who you are and who you are becoming, which is arguably way more valuable and important than any real estate deal you'll ever buy, any stock you'll ever buy. Because who you grow into is way more important. You can go make money, like money is not important, but who you're growing into that's the important thing. And you and I were talking about this before off camera, like we said, that a lot of times it's just a filter, because if you're writing a check for, we'll even call it 10 grand, right, just to go to GrowthCon versus the $500 check, you're going to be surrounded by different people, like you were saying. And then those people who you meet, like that helps shape your identity of who you're becoming. So keep going.
Well, and earlier we were talking about mindset, and it's mindset's part of it. Then there's the skill set piece of it. So it's, it's mindset, it's skill set, it's self-confidence, self-belief, your ability to network and communicate with people. You're building all these different things, right? So do all that stuff. And then I'm listening to podcasts all the time. Like I don't listen to rip music in the car. I don't watch TV. I watch YouTube videos or documentaries where I'm learning something like mental stimulation. And then, so Arate Syndicate was like a life altering event for me. Like I said, it was a big price tag. I applied for it. I got accepted. And then that's when you learned how much it was after you applied and got accepted. And I'm like, I didn't have the balls to do it, man. And it was a huge stretch for me at the time, right? You're talking about $6 grand a month.
Well, dude, that's more than the average salary.
Yeah. So I bitched out on it the first year. I didn't do it. And then, and basically it's like 100 people. You're in it for, it's a year-long thing. They have like 3 or 4 summits throughout the year, and then monthly calls and all that stuff with Andy and Ed. Andy Frisella owns First Form. They're worth like $2 billion. Ed Milet's the best speaker on the planet. He's probably worth $800 million. Like these guys are no joke. And that's who you're going to be in a room with, along with 100 other people learning from them. So like, it's a big price ticket, but when you really think about the value that you're getting and all of this stuff, I say this now, back then I didn't have this perspective. That was actually a deal, like a deal for like what you got and what you were exposed to. So I didn't do it. And then they ended up having what was called Arate Live, which was a 1-day event, which was probably almost a year later, and it was open to the public. So I bought a ticket and I went to it, and I was sitting there, and like 2 hours into the event, I was just pissed, like pissed. And I was mad because in that moment, I was realizing I had just cheated myself and I had just missed out on a year of what I was experiencing in the first 2 hours. And I've spent a lot of time, a lot of money. I've seen everyone speak. I've been to a lot of conferences, all the stuff. So I'm sitting there a year later being exposed to and seeing what I missed out on the whole last year. And I was so mad and upset with myself because I pussed out and I didn't go all in on it. And I was realizing in that moment, like I sold myself short. So anyways, they opened enrollment again and I applied and I didn't think I'd get accepted because I didn't do it the first year. Well, I got accepted the second year and then the price thing comes. So I'm accepted, I'm all excited. And, then you see, because it was a little bit more expensive the second year. I think the first year was like 50 grand or like $5,000 a month. So now it's like 65,000 one time or $6,000 a month. And I was there in the exact same position I was a year before. And I was not going to do it, man. And I'm like, man, it's a lot of money. I start thinking small. I see all the stuff. And then I remembered sitting in that chair, in that seat, and like being upset with myself for not like having the courage to invest in myself. And I was like, I'm not going to out again. And I hurried up, filled it up, swiped the card, dude, and just grabbed my and I did it. And it's the best thing I've ever done in my entire life outside of my spiritual work I've been doing. Like that was a life-changing, altering moment for me. And then if you want to get into the energy piece, whether you guys are in that or not, the law of attraction is a real thing. And there's something to be said for when you're willing to make a large investment like that in yourself that terrifies you and is scary. Like it's scary. My financial position in 2019 was not anywhere remotely close to what it is today. That was a big deal. It was 3 times what my house payment, well, maybe not 3. Yeah, 3 times what my house payment was. Like it was a big deal. And I did it. And the relationships that fast forward going through it, the relationships that I made, but also, being one of the smaller guys in that room and one of the younger guys in that room, I developed relationships and I have guys that are like big brothers to me now. And that's worth more than the content and all the stuff that I learned and all of that, like changed my life and business too. But more than anything, what that did was, number one, the muscle of investing in myself when it was extremely uncomfortable, and just basically making this deal with myself is like, I'm going to get everything that I can out of this group. I'm going to get everything that I can out of this investment. There's an energy that happens when you go do something like that. And what came back to me was tenfold that investment. The relationships are a huge deal. But when you're sitting there, I remember sitting there and there's a guy named Scott Simons, who's like a big brother to me. And he probably makes $5, $6, $7 million a year. He's a baller. I remember sitting there and I'm like, these guys are no different than me. They're just 10 years, 15 years down the road from where I'm at. This fucking guy, he's just like me. There's nothing special about him. He's like Scott's a hillbilly from West Virginia. I love the dude and he balls out super hard. He's got all these businesses, tons of real estate investments, all this stuff. So what it did for me, putting myself in that environment, I'll go back, like we have our goals, right? So we have our goals and our dreams, but we feel like they're way out there. So being in that room took all those goals and it brought it right here. And I was like, this is real. I can do this. I'm seeing these guys do this. And the only difference is they're 10 years down the road from where I'm at. They work hard, they invest in themselves. And they're literally telling me like, dude, you're doing all the right things. There's just time as part of the equation. So that understanding forever changed my life. And it cost me $72,000 to learn that. But being in that environment, like literally changed the entire trajectory of my life. And like fast forward now, one of the guys in that group has $800,000 with me. Other guys, like I have deals going on with other guys, like the relationships, my ability to be able to pick up the phone and call someone who I love and trust. And I know they're looking out for me and I'm like a little brother to them. Like you can't put a price tag on that. So that thing with Arte, and that was in 2019, changed everything, the entire trajectory of my entire life. And it also came on the backside of the scariest thing I've ever done too. I know that was winded, but like it's a big deal. Like that's literally, if you were to ask me like, why are you successful? I would say like my work ethic, number one, but it's my relationships and my continued mindset and self-development.
Dude, You gave me chills a couple of times because I can relate so much to that story. And while this is your story and I want to touch on 2 or 3 other things, I just wanted to relate to you for a minute that, I've had that same regret. My wife and I had an opportunity to join a couples mastermind, very similar. We applied, went through the application process, got accepted. And then I found out how much it was. And it was like 40 grand a year, 45 grand a year, something like that. And I instantly, like, scarcity mentality. I was like, holy cow, this is more than my mortgage payment is a year. I can't do it. I can't do it. So, I called him up and apologized. And he's like, hey, no worries. Like, if it's not the right time, that's great. Anyways, fast forward, I saw him at an event and I was talking to him, and his name's Mike Ayala. I said, Mike, I regret not freaking joining your mastermind. If I could go back in time, dude, I would have figured it out. I would have put it on a credit card. Like, I would have done whatever. And if a lot of people are thinking like, oh man, Jordy just put 40 grand on a credit card that he can't afford. Well, if there's anything I've learned in life, it's say yes and figure it out later. Right.
One thing, just to jump in, one thing that I want to add to because it's, I think, really important with what we're both talking about. I think there's this, we don't deserve, or I'm not good enough, or who am I to go spend 45,000 on this thing? And I think we get like that. That's a big thing in our decision-making process, that we don't deserve to do that, or we're not good enough to do that, or that's excessive, or whatever it is, that limiting belief about ourselves, or like, what's it actually going to do for me? You know what I mean? I just want to interject that because I think that's a huge part of what gets in the way of making a decision like that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and, it's also hard to quantify, if I invest this many dollars in this mastermind or this course or this whatever, like, what's my return going to be? And we want to see like that return, right? It's easy with a real estate deal because you're like, hey, if I buy this, I'm into it for X, it's going to cash flow X a year. Like, those numbers are easy to see, but investing in ourselves is like, there's not a quantifiable future return, but the returns are there if you put the work in, right?
Yeah. Well, and there's that faith piece, and that's where I was saying the energy piece earlier too. Like, it's not, if you're going to take that risk and you're going to get out of your comfort zone and you're going to do something like that. And again, it could be the $500 ticket to GrowthCon to sit in the back. Like, doesn't matter where you're at when you're hitting another level of discomfort and investing in yourself. The dollar sign to it doesn't matter, because it's the same energy, right? Whether it's me putting up 65 grand or you putting up 45 grand, or the person listening to this and them spending $500 to go to a thing. It's like, it's the same stretch, and it's the same level of uncomfort. But when you do that and you invest in yourself, and then you actually lean in and you make the commitment, like, okay, I've already paid the price of admission. Now I need to make sure that I extract everything that I can from this. It's not going to not work out. Like, it's like energetically, law of it, like, it's a written law that it's not going to not work out. You're not going to not get anything from it if you're doing all those things. Plus you're saying, okay, I paid the price of admission. Like, now I'm going to extract everything that I can from this. Like, you will get results. And if you go into it with like, oh, I just spent this money, so now I'm going to show up and I'm going to expect it to just come back to me. That's not how it works. Like, all you did was pay the price of admission. That's it.
Yep.
You pay the price of admission to a theme park. You still got to go get on the ride and do it.
Yeah. It's interesting. I would agree that like with Slaria, it's $125 a year, and people complain about that. And I'm like, if you want to invest in real estate, but you're worried about $125 a year, like, that should be the first $125 you allocate in your budget, because that's going to force you to grow if you choose. Right. But yeah,
it goes back to mindset, man. Like, we're programmed to think nothing of going and like, we do mortgages. I see people's credit all day. Like, people think nothing of going and racking up 20, 40, 60, 80, 100 grand on some college degree, and they have their degree in liberal arts or whatever it is, and they're like not even doing anything with their degree. You think nothing of going and spending 4 years and tens of thousands of dollars to get a piece of paper, but something that will actually change your life for real, you don't want to go spend $200 on it. It's a mindset.
Totally. Well, dude, while we're talking about mindset, I have a couple of questions for you, and then we'll wrap up and put a bow on it. Let's talk about your Ferrari.
Okay.
Why did you buy it? How did you get over the mental hurdles, as we're talking about mindset, to buy it?
I will say this, and I made a post about it. The mental process of buying the Ferrari and giving myself permission and doing that mental tug of war back and forth, and like having this, like, not even sell myself on it, but come to terms with it. And then like 2 hours later, go through the whole process over. I did that for like a couple of months because it's like, it's, you know, I value a dollar. I'm a very good steward of money. I'm frugal, like all of this stuff. Right. So to buy a $325,000 car is like, I'm doing what, you know? So buying it wasn't the hard process. It was the mental part. Like, I'm good enough to do this. I'm okay to do this. Like, it's not excessive. But the reason I bought it was one of my coaches actually challenged me to do it. And he has been for a couple of years. So like, I bought it primarily for my brand and the marketing and all this stuff. Cause I know it is dumb as like the Rolex watches or the Ferrari or the big houses and all that stuff. Like, people, like, there's signs of success, and like, when that's just what it is, right? Like, if you are wanting to be a leader in an organization, you're wanting people to trust you with investing money. Like, I want real estate agents and loan officers to come to my brokerages and hang their license. Like, they want to see a leader who has the signs of success. So it's part of that, and for the branding, but also just doing it because I can and being okay with that. And there's something really important that I want to put in there, is being a good steward of money. Like, if you can't buy, so like, you shouldn't buy something if you can't afford it multiple times over, you know? So I bought it specifically for the brand. And then also because it was a stretch item for me, just in general, to buy a car like that. To be honest with you, I'm not really like a big car guy. Until you drive a Ferrari, then you'll understand and you'll become one. But it was, yeah, man. I mean, that was the process. I didn't really, like, I didn't grow up thinking like, oh, I want a Ferrari or whatever. I put one on my vision board like a couple of years ago, and I have the exact one that's on my vision board. Side note, for vision boards and stuff, like, that stuff's real too. But no, dude, I bought it because it was a marketing. And again, it's not an expense, it's an investment. And just the attention, like going to Saria in it, you know, the attention and the conversations and all of this stuff that I got because I pulled up in a car like that, like, it will pay for itself, and it will actually make me money. Like, I will make money on that car for sure. I make a post about it, and then I have people hitting me up like, hey, I'd like to invest money with you. So, as materialistic and all of that shit as and flashy as it sounds, like, it's a status symbol and a success symbol that you can't fake that, right? Like, I guess you can fake it renting one and all of that. So that was why. But the mental part of that, and like allowing myself to do that, and just feeling like it's excessive financially and reckless and all this stuff, and I could do so much other things with this, that was a process. But also to that, it's an investment as well. Like, that car, I'll probably, when I sell it, I will end up driving it for free, or it will maybe cost me 20, 30, 40 grand tops, because I bought it right. And I bought the one, like, they hold their value, kind of like the Rolex watches do. Like, this watch right here, I could sell this for 3 grand more than I paid for it. So it's an investment, but it's also like a success symbol, and it makes me feel good too. I can tell you, when I'm in the Ferrari and I'm driving it, the way that I feel about myself, and knowing who I have had to become, and all the that I've had to do, and everything I've been through to be in a position where I can buy a Ferrari and it doesn't change my life financially. Like, it's not that stretch spending 65 grand on Arete Syndicate. Like, it's well within my budget. I can do it. It's not a big deal. But when I'm driving that, the way that it makes me feel about myself, and knowing everything that's gone into it, it's like a trophy and a proud moment. And what that does for me mentally and emotionally, and with my confidence, like, far outweighs like what the monthly payment is. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, and I was more interested in, and thank you for that, because it's all like, if you guys are listening, 95% is not about owning a flashy sports car. It's all about growing into the next level, next version, higher version of Mike. That is like, it's a struggle, because I go through the same thing. I'm like, I've got it on my vision board too. It's a Lamborghini, but I'm like, I'm sure I could afford it now, but I'm like, man, I don't know. It's a lot of money. Like, I could go buy this, and this with it. And, is that money better served there? So it's interesting to hear you go through all of that, and just who you came out the other end.
It's an identity. It's a thing where your identity is growing, and also for me, like, if I'm going to be like, number one, like, I've got, like, I like watches are my thing, and traveling. But like, if I'm like looking at this Rolex that I wear, it's a reminder to me of, like, it's a trophy, because there's a goal attached to it, and the goal was accomplished for me to get this. But also, it's a reminder too of, like, if I'm going to wear a watch like this, I better be acting like a guy who wears a watch like this. If I'm going to be driving a Ferrari, I better be acting like a dude that drives a Ferrari. I better be showing up like a guy that's in a position to drive a Ferrari. So I need to, and that's tied into my core values. Like I need to be leading by example, integrity, family, and freedom. Like, am I expert at my craft? Like a yes attitude, loyalty, like the experience that my clients have. Like, so it's about who you're becoming. It's not about the actual thing.
Yep.
Because driving the Ferrari, like, yeah, it's fun and it's cool, but that will fade away. But when you are in love with the dude that you know you are and who you've become while you're driving your Ferrari, that's an awesome feeling. And that's what we're chasing. It's not the actual thing. It's about who do I have to become to attain that? Just like I know you recently, and maybe this is like public information or not, but I know you recently moved and purchased a home. And you know, like as we stretch with those things, it's a stretch. It's another thing. Like you're joining a mastermind, you're doing whatever it is, you're putting yourself in an environment where you're stretching yourself and it becomes a new standard, but you have to level up to make that be your new standard. Another thing that I do is I only fly first class now. And it's just a new standard that I have. So like, when I'm getting on a plane and I used to see all the people in first class, all of us are looking at them, wondering who are they? What do they do? And it's like, I don't sit in the back of the plane anymore. Like I sit in the front because that's who I've built myself into. But you have to be a steward, a good steward of money. You have to be financially, a good steward of money. And I believe if you are a good steward of money, you'll be trusted with more as well. So it's that balancing act. So I'm not saying go buy flashy shit and it's all about the material things. Like that's not at all the message that either one of us are putting off, but it's about that's all that is the end result of a lot of hard work and stuff that's happened to where that can just be a byproduct of it. And that's just whether it's money, like whatever material stuff you like, all it is a byproduct of who you've built yourself to be.
So true. Cool. Well, I want to be sensitive to your time. I've got 2 last questions that will put a nice bow on this conversation. And dude, thanks again. I've really enjoyed it. What's one thing you would want to tell someone who's working towards financial freedom?
I would say it's a process. It's not an overnight thing and it's not a get rich quick thing. So, when you shift your mindset into a lifestyle and you're making better decisions, because like time's going to go by either way. So in 10 years is going to be here. And what we do, like looking back in 10 years from now, what we do now is going to dictate and shape what that 10 years looks like. The time's going by either way. So don't get caught up in the instant gratification, but also don't get caught up in the comparing the Instagram life that everyone shows their reel on. You have to be disciplined and understand that it's a process. So like you need to be disciplined in making those the right decisions regularly over time to where you're going to be there, because like the life that you and I are living today is a direct result of like the shit that Jordy 3 years ago and 5 years ago committed to himself then. Same thing with me. So for me, like real estate's what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing. So, it's hard and you're going to have a lot of problems come up and you're going to want to quit and you're going to wonder why you're doing this. And like, you're going to like I cry of frustration of tears, but plan B is reinforcing plan A. When you take quitting off the table and you commit to yourself for real, like I want to be financially independent. I'm going to do it through real estate or whatever your vehicle is. And you commit to it and you understand it's going to be a process and it's going to take time. That would be my answer to that.
Perfect. That's a perfect answer. So knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently on your journey?
I would have been a little bit more aggressive with the relationships and the people that I chose to spend my time around. And I would have got in the environments that I've put myself in now sooner. And I think that's about it, man. Like I like, there's not a whole lot I would change, but like the people that you spend your time around and the environment that you're in is a big deal. And I would have got much more spiritually involved way earlier if I knew what I know now. And I'm not talking church like that. I'm talking like real spiritual stuff, self-development, like with you. I would have done that way earlier because that's accelerated everything in my life. And I know when you take care of you first, all the outside shit happens. Like when you're taking care of yourself first, like I said earlier, you're never going to outgrow your identity. So when you start addressing your limiting beliefs and your programming, and the environment that you grew up around and all of that stuff, the sooner that you can address that and start rewriting those stories, the sooner you're going to experience joy, happiness, and financial abundance.
So good. Well, dude, thank you so much for the conversation. I selfishly enjoyed it a ton. Where can people find out more about you, follow you on social media?
On Instagram, I'm at michael.burns, Burns. Facebook, I'm Mr. Michael Burns. And then I've got a podcast, Freedom Lifestyle Experience. And we'll have you on the podcast too. We need to get some new episodes going, but I put out content all the time, and I'm just here to build relationships and provide value. And really, I know if I'm being the best version of myself and I'm building relationships and I'm staying loyal to my core values and just trying to provide value, like the rest of it will take care of itself. And that really is the truth.
Yeah. And your mortgage brokerage is lifestyle lending, and real estate's lifestyle.
Lifestyle lending is our mortgage company, and then Lifestyle Realty is our real estate brokerage.
Perfect. Well, dude, thanks. I enjoyed the conversation, and we'll chat soon.
Yeah, man. Appreciate the opportunity to have me on. And if there's anything I can help anyone with, please reach out and let me know.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of The Financially Free Investor. If you found value in this episode or know someone who would find value in this information, please share with them, subscribe, and send us a review.